Hello and welcome to the first ever roundtable discussion. I'm so excited to be joined by some amazing creators, all of them which sometimes seem to be a little obscure but also very interesting at the same time. We have the great Jess, we have Matt Rainwater. I don't think I've given you a title yet. Matt, and then we have the mysterious Taylor back again to grace us with their presence. So, if you guys didn't notice, part of the fun of the round table is it's designed for us to disagree as we, journey through odd topics and whatnot. So I thought it was very fitting to have two knights fighting each other. So, decide who is whose knight, and then we'll go from there. But why don't we just start with some brief introductions and maybe we can get Matt to tell us a little bit about himself. Oh, and disclaimer, as always, these are all of our opinions, so just take it with a grain of salt. All you, Matt.
All right. Sure. I'm Matt Rainwater. I have recently finished Trailer Park Warlock, which was a webtoon, or still is a webtoon original series, and am currently publishing on Webtoon Canvas, The Legend of Redneck. I draw, paint, and also practice Tai Chi, and that's me.
Oh, very cool. So we'll be brief on these, and then if people have questions later, you guys can ask them during the Q&A. So Jess, why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
I'm Jess, also known as Hobbish. I just completed a Webtoon Canvas comic called The Witch's Stone, and I'm currently working on another Webtoon Canvas comic. I'm in the writing phase right now, so it's not posting yet, but I think that's about it.
Taylor, tell us about you.
Oh, yeah. Hi. So, I started on Webtoon Canvas, and that's where I met all of these lovely people. And recently, I've been writing and self-publishing my books. I have one coming out in a week, 8 days. So,
Very exciting.
that's it. That's all I have to say about myself.
You don't want to tell us the title of the book?
It's on the screen, The Stone Project. It comes out February 3rd.
Okay,
Yeah, tell us
awesome.
about these books.
right. We're so
I was like, yeah, tell us what's in the book, Taylor.
Right. I want spoilers. I want to know everything that's going on in the book.
Just tell us the ending. Well, it has a really happy ending. I think it's a really delightful read.
I'm very
Really
excited.
low stakes.
I'm very excited for it. So, with all of that being said, these are your wonderful host, co-host, and whatever else you want to call us. So, we will be the ones directing the conversation, developing on the topic of what is a successful creator. And so, of course, we're going to do our best to pay attention to the chat and answer any questions, but a majority of the time we'll probably be mostly engaging with each other. But feel free to say whatever you want in the chat, and we'll make sure to encompass everybody as much as we can. And so with that, let's just dive right into the main topic of success. And what I think is really interesting about this is I think people have different understandings of what success is, like from a younger person's perspective to an older person, and then from a hobbyist to a professional. Like everyone might have different terms of success. So it kind of makes me feel like we should probably start at like the very bottom. And Matt, do you think that inexperienced creators can make successful webtoons?
Oh yeah, I mean, it goes to how do you want to define success for yourself, right? And I think that there are tiers to that where you start at, like I think starting off with the easiest way to be successful as a webtoon creator is make a webtoon. Like get something done, which sounds easy, but is actually like probably the hardest part in a lot of ways, to actually like start a story from bare bones and work your way to like publishing it and putting out there, and not losing your mind during that process, because it's easy to get really really like discouraged, right? Like I went through having I would call a moderately successful webtoon, you know, and then going to another story. That was a really nerve-wracking experience for me, because I was like, I don't really know if people are going to like the next story. They liked my last one, but I don't know what they're going to think about this next one. And so I think starting there is the best place to be, and then like letting it take on a life of its own. And I think that's kind of that's like, I talked about easy mode, and then like intermediate mode is like being willing to let your work take on its own life and see where it goes. And then after that, you know, there's hard mode, which is one that is very difficult for just about anybody to succeed at, which is like the financial stability part, like the financial, like being financially successful as a webtoon artist, or as an artist in general, is extremely difficult. But that's okay, because you have these tiers to work up to, right? You have these goals that you can start from the bottom, work your way up, and it's not a race. You just kind of get there in the time that you get there.
Yeah, I kind of like how you explained success. It's kind of in different tiers, because that's kind of how I view it. I feel like there are like with goals, like you have short-term goals and you have long-term goals. I feel like in successful terms, like you have like immediate success, like maybe it could be just publishing one episode. That's a successful experience. And then you have like, oh, becoming a webtoon original or like a published author is like the long-term success.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I feel like we're kind of on the same page in terms of how like we view success. What about y'all? How do you guys view success?
Jess, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
Oh no, what did I say? Did I say something crazy? People are like, justice for Matt.
No. I didn't want to speak over Jess if she had something to say.
You said starting from the bottom, and then you said Matt.
You did say that. I just let it slide. I was like, well, I mean, whatever. I'll start from wherever.
Oh my god, that's not what I meant. I've already been canceled. I'm just in the stream. Okay, so let me clarify. I meant like from the bottom concept of success, not that Matt's at the bottom. If anything, actually, I'm not going to go into that. So you guys put us, y'all rank us how you want. Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, Jess, go ahead.
Okay. What was the question again? How do you find success?
What's the hierarchy here? Apparently that's the question.
Okay. I think success is whatever you want it to be, really. I think it depends what your goals are, to me. Whatever, if you achieve whatever your goal is, then you were successful. Whether that's, just completing a comic, or moving on up to being like a published, comic illustrator or whatever, it just depends how you define it. And like for me, it was just to complete a comic and learn along the way whenever I was making The Witch's Stone. So I felt like I was a success by the end, because I did what I set out to do,
Which I hope I'm not hitting on this point too hard, but like, there are so many people who have ideas for stories, and they never get to that point of actually doing episode 1, Like I remember I went from like middle school to like almost the end of art school, never completing a full, just like 24-page story. And it took me, however many years that was, like 8 years, getting to that point where I had the confidence to do it. And so I really feel strongly about that sentiment of like the first step in being a successful like comic book storyteller, any storyteller, is just like making a story. And then also, lastly, I'll say setting an achievable like frame that you can work from. So like it's easier to start from a short story than it is to say, you know, oh, my first story is going to be a Lord of the Rings size epic. Like, make sure you don't do that, right? Like that would be that's like, if there's any advice I can give anybody, just avoid epics from the beginning and then work your way up to that.
And I feel like as when you do something like comics or self-publishing or whatever, it's you have the luxury and the burden of being able to set your own goals and defining your own success.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so important, especially when you're on the internet, to divide what goals are things that you personally have control over and what goals are things that you have, like, it would be great if it happened, but at the end of the day, you can't control if it actually ends up happening or not, like follower count and reader views and how much money you're making.
Yeah. Because I would say, like, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, like, I would say if you can make like, let's say your webtoon, let's just say it's a webtoon, and your webtoon's like, you want to make it 15 episodes. If those are the best 15 episodes that you've ever written, and you can finish them and be like, oh, I can, like, if I died tomorrow, I'd be okay with this. Like, that's success in my mind. Like, that's often how I measure success with creative endeavors, is like, if I died tomorrow, how would I feel about, I mean, I wouldn't feel anything, but how would I feel about,
in
like,
somewhere in the cosmos?
Yeah, exactly. Like, looking at it from the afterlife, how would I feel about this work, right?
Yeah.
Would I be okay with it, you know?
Yeah.
Would it put a smile on my face? Would I know that people would be happy with it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, it's kind of like, did I do the best that I could do at the time?
Right.
And then if I can say, yeah, I did do the best that I could do at the time that I did that, then I feel like it was a success, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's interesting, because I kind of feel like, for me, success is kind of based on, am I making progress? So, like, I think, especially for people in, like, pre-production, or people who are, you know, still trying to, like, roadmap stuff, like, I feel when I'm procrastinating, or when I'm, like, binge watching Netflix or something, like, I'm not being successful. But, like, in the long term of things, I think that it comes down to, like, am I, like, chipping away at pursuing the goal that I'm trying to reach? Because it's hard for me to balance on my side of things, like, my IRL life, and then, like, my obligations in that, and, like, with my extracurriculars or hobbies, or because I, like, have other hobbies outside of this too, like writing or drawing and whatnot. And so I'm kind of like, if you have a full plate, it might be a little different in terms of just where you're at with your comic or whatever, if you're producing episodes or not. I'm like, are you making progress from where you were a month ago? And I think, like, that is actually, for me, the most successful mindset to have. Because, like, I think you could, like, make 3 episodes, and if it took you 3 months, like, okay, but was the goal to make 3 episodes? And then if you did end up finally making the 3 episodes, then it's, like, a successful hurrah. So,
Right.
I don't know. Like,
being able to, like, hit the goal and then move the goalpost.
Right, yeah.
For the next thing.
I think that's kind of how it is. That's a good way of putting it. Like, I like to have, like, these little increments, and then just, like, keep moving forward, like, down the football field.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I think it also, it's worth stating, make sure that you celebrate your little successes too, because
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely.
I know that I did not do that at all, and I had to force myself to celebrate later on, where like I had to force myself to celebrate when I was done with Trailer Park Warlock. Like this was Trailer Park Warlock was a project where I was like towards the end in tears because it was such a like emotionally intense writing experience. And the thing that I wanted to do when I was all done with it was to just get on to the next project. But I was like, nope, you're going to take 3 days to do literally nothing. You can play a video game or whatever. I ended up playing Hylix 2. And then, like, you know, go eat a nice dinner. And then, like, just take time to set it in. Like, let it set in, you know.
Appreciate what you did.
Yeah, because that was an 11-year project for me. Like that was
Wow.
And you get into like I guess from my perspective, I'm speaking from like you get into this mindset of it becomes so much of your life that it's this is the best way that I could put it. The week after I was done with Trailer Park Warlock, I went to sit at the desk, and I was like, "Wait, I'm done with that. What am I supposed to do now? I don't understand."
Staring off into the abyss.
Yeah, I was just like, "Wait, what am I supposed to do? This doesn't make any sense." Like, there was a thing here. There was a project I was doing, and it's not here anymore. So I just say that to give people context on like, you know, the kind of mindset that can be created if you're not if you don't have a certain amount of detachment, I guess, from it. I mean, you don't want to be 100% detached all the time, but you want to detach enough that it's not like consuming you, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important to set some of your goals up to be like, some of my goals need to be things that will allow me to do this long term.
Yes.
Like I have to say, I want to take a day off every single week and force myself to do it. Because if you don't force yourself to do it, you're going to burn yourself out.
Yep. Absolutely.
There's actually an interesting comment in the chat. The Yellow Turnip said, basically, they're saying having no regrets is success. And I find that interesting because I think realistically, like, you'll have regrets. Like, there's no way that you can, like, work in a creative field and not have regrets. Like, in an idealistic world, I think, like, yeah, having no regrets would be great. But, like, there's so many things where I don't think there's any situation where any artist is like, yeah, I have no regrets on this. There's nothing that I wouldn't fix or change.
Right. I'm 100% happy with this thing that I put out 5 years ago. I wouldn't change a single thing.
Right.
Said no one ever.
So it makes me feel like I think what we're trying to say, at least what I'm trying to say, is, and like y'all can agree or disagree, but like I think the perspective of success needs to change in terms of like if you're not popular or if you're not doing big numbers or if your book's not selling out, that you can still be successful. Like success is determined by what you place success to be.
Yeah. I would say, like, so I agree with what you're saying about, you know, you're going to have regrets. You're going to have things where it's like, oh, I really, like, I made some decisions there I don't really like. But I do think, like, the mindset, right? Because the mindset versus the actual, like, results are two totally different things. Mm-hmm. The mindset you want to have is, like, not even no regrets, but no regrets. Like, you're just, you know there are going to be mistakes, but you're not going to stay focused on the mistakes and just allow them to be part of your life, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I like that. So with all of that in mind, like, what do you guys think, or maybe Taylor, why don't you answer this? What do you think, how can creators increase success in their stories? Like, what can creators do?
I mean, I guess this is like the most cheesy way to answer this, but you have to be creating things that you want to consume because that's the only way that you're going to know how to market it to an audience. if you're writing or drawing something that you have never, like, have no interest in, how are you going to know what pieces of it are going to pull people in? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think it is also easy to get caught in a mindset early on where you feel like you need to make something that is like what everybody else is consuming or like really into because you want to be part of, you know, the cool kids club or whatever, like
the trend.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many stories I wrote that were just literally whatever it was that I was watching that year, like because going back to all of my story ideas up until art school, it was like, oh, I watched Cowboy Bebop that year, so here's clearly a story that's just Cowboy Bebop, or like, this is Dragon Ball Z, this is that. It wasn't until much later on where I started thinking really intently of like, what am I not, like, what have I not seen out there that I think is actually my own unique voice, and that's a, you know, yeah, that's where all the gold comes from, for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure.
I think that's a great answer, to make something that you genuinely like. That's really important.
Well, and I want to add one other thing, which is if you can pull as much from your own direct experience as possible, that stuff is so overlooked in writing, but it is extremely powerful. It is,
you can
the stuff,
feel it when people are writing what they know.
Exactly. And you know, because you hear people say like write from what you know, but it's such a blasé aphorism that it's hard to know what that actually means. What that means is like if you can relate, like if you can design a character based off of somebody that you met in real life, or like if you can like come up with scenarios or think up scenarios that are based on your own like experiences, like don't let your traumas just be something that get in the way of your life. Let it fuel your stories. Like let it be the powder that like ignites.
Share the trauma.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good way to get genuine emotion into your story that feels genuine.
I think
circling back to increasing success, I think that even people who are not also creators, consumers, can feel when a story is genuine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's important for everyone to identify their weaknesses, because I think like sometimes we can have habits that are very like self-indulgent, but like there are things keeping us from being like moving to the next level sometimes. And like sometimes it could be as simple as getting like a critique from someone, or feeling that like our story doesn't have any flaws, or feeling like why aren't people enjoying my story. Like I feel like a lot of things can be opened up if we're more open-minded to the other experiences that people are having with our story. So which isn't to say that it's bad. I just mean like if you feel that your story isn't connecting as well, well, that's when you have to put on like your critical thinking hat and try and think of like, well, what is it? Is it like a marketing issue? Is it a story issue? Is it a art issue? Like, what is the actual issue? And then try and pinpoint like how you can improve the next few chapters or the next episode or whatever you're doing. I guess it's a little different with the book since you're doing beta readers and stuff.
You gotta do it all at once. You gotta sweep straight through the whole thing.
So I guess that's a little different, which actually, so this kind of segues into like our next topic, which is basically about story and art and defining success in that. So Taylor, when we're thinking about art and storytelling, does having a knowledge of that impact the success of a person's webtoon, or I guess novel in your case?
Yes. And on a surface level, I think the question is asking more like, you know, when people see your webtoon or your story or and like read an excerpt or whatever, are they impressed by that initial impression of it? Yes or no, and that will draw in readers or won't draw in readers. But not only that, but having a knowledge of art and storytelling gives you the backing to bend the rules and do something different, so you're not having to follow what's trending. You don't have to just mark it off of a trope or what's trending. You can actually start bending rules and doing something that will pull in long-term readers.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do think it's important, though, to not let, if you have a story that you want to tell and you feel like you don't have a good knowledge of art or storytelling, don't let it hold you back too much, because one of those things you learn by doing it, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
That's what I like so much about art in general, is that there's, I would say there's kind of a sort of a low entry fee, in the sense that all it requires is that you have the courage to just put something out there, right? And so long as you can deal with the potentiality of like some kind of rejection and just move beyond that, you will make a successful something. And you know what that success is will be different from thing to thing, but like if you're a musician, like you will be able to make a song if you're willing to like have some mess ups and have some things that don't quite connect, but then also move on to the next song. Like just be willing, the willingness to move on and to like embrace like your tenacity, basically.
Be willing to fail.
Yeah.
A few times.
I think you have to be willing to define your success as, or by, like, you learned a lot from the experience.
On a personal level.
Yeah.
I think being happy with yourself is kind of some of like the most important aspects of being like a writer or an artist. Like, and I think that's really hard when it's hard not to compare sometimes, you know, like people who come out with their first story and like all of a sudden they have like 1 million followers, or like someone who's like in first grade is like a world renowned artist. Like, so it can make you like, there's a lot of weight sometimes I think people have, but I think like just continuing to grow on your own journey and like continuous improvement, that's kind of like my self motto to myself. Like, is my art improving? Is it better? Because I don't know if I've told y'all, but I didn't start digital art. Like, I was very much opposed to digital art before like I got into webtoons and webcomics and all of that stuff. I was like a traditionalist through and through. Like, everything was like color pencils or dye. And so I feel like it held me back in some aspects, because like I've learned a lot more skills since I've switched over to digital art, just because it like opened my mindset to different things. And I was so like in a, I don't know what to call it, like strict, unwilling to change mindset, that I think like I did start to plateau a little bit with like where I was. And so like I was happy with where I was, but I knew I could be better. And so I think,
you know, it's really funny. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, what's really funny about that is I'm having that happening with digital art, and why I'm going more into traditional art lately, because I was feeling like I was plateauing in digital art.
Yeah, and that's why I feel like it's cool to kind of like mix it up, like learn a little bit more, learn some different skills, because especially with like traditional art, we were talking about watercolors. I don't know if we talked about that on stream or off stream, but I feel like that's like a whole different skill set from like using acrylics or using oils or anything. So it just kind of opens your horizons to stuff. And I think being experimental and like dipping your toe in to try and like test out different things really helps with that like growth process to get to the point where like you are really happy with your art.
Yeah.
As far as storytelling goes, I'm just like, oh, I have lots of thoughts about that, but I kind of feel like you have to study to tell decent stories. Like, not like every day, but like a basic knowledge of how to craft it a little bit. So,
Yeah.
I guess it's a little bit of a side question, but Jess, um, I think we've talked about it before, but like you're new-ish to storytelling, at least from what I can remember. Were you doing like a lot of studying when you were preparing for the Witch's Stone, or did you just like caution to the wind?
Oh no, I did a lot of studying. I was like, living on YouTube videos about how to write. So yeah, I have a whole playlist of YouTube videos saved of writing like plot structures and crafting strong characters and all of that stuff. So yeah, I did study a lot before I started.
What about Taylor, Matt? Did y'all do anything, or was it just I got this?
Yeah, especially moving from the comic writing to the novel writing, I would get partway through a draft and be like, something's not working, and then I would go on like a YouTube binge, just like watching story structure videos and watching other people talk about their process and trying to fit what I already had into their structures, just trying to figure out like where I was hitting roadblocks and what I was having issues with and why.
Mm-hmm.
And like being able to actually take my work and see not only like what the issue was, but realizing once I actually hit the roadblock, how much earlier in the story the issue was arising, really kind of changed my perspective on the whole process, because it wasn't just like a straight through from chapter 1 to the end of the book. It was a lot of, you write for a while and then you have to go back and fix some stuff up to where you wrote to, and then write a little bit more and then go back. And you're always learning and changing things, and it's fantastic.
I love that you've said this, because that's pretty much how I write. Like, I'll sit down and I'll write like all the scenes that come to my mind that I want to happen, right? And then I'll find a plot structure that I like, and then I'll fit those scenes into the plot structure, and then connect the dots in the plot structure.
And I love playing with plot structure. It's become like my new thing in my drafts, is trying to like do the plot structure, but like a little bit different.
What about you, Matt?
I mean, I think for myself, I was just gonna say, I mean, I went to art school specifically for storytelling and all that stuff, so I had spent a fair amount of time getting really deep in the weeds on it. And I think that my lesson that I learned from that is you don't need art school for that. That's a pro tip. Like, you don't need to go to art school to learn how to like tell stories.
You can save that 40K.
Yeah, exactly. Do what Taylor and Jess are talking about, which is you can learn on YouTube. You can, also making the mistakes and all that stuff, but having some kind of rubric and discipline to work from, so that you can have an idea for yourself, like, objectively, how am I doing? How am I meeting sort of standards that are already set in culture? And then over time, you'll start to get ideas about like, okay, how can I shoot above those objectives that are already culturally, in the zeitgeist or whatever, and find my own like voice in that, basically, if that makes sense.
For sure. One of my favorites, and this man does not need a shout out from me, but if you want to learn about craft and storytelling, you can go and watch Brandon Sanderson's like university lectures just for free on the internet. On YouTube. He just posts them.
He does.
You can find professional university lessons just on the internet for free.
He's so amazing. Like, I feel like he was so underrated for so long. Um,
He's
Matt,
so,
I'm
he's
also
so smart.
Matt, I'm also shocked. Like, I really thought that you were a pantser, and I was like, oh, this is perfect because I know Jess and Taylor are very structured. So I was like, yes, we've got one pantser in the group. And then you were like, I went to school for storytelling.
No, I
Gotcha.
I would say I went overboard on it for sure. No, I mean I think the way that I talk often is very much like go in head first. Don't worry about like the details and let it work itself out. Largely because I don't know why. I guess because I just like that attitude. I think that's it.
That's how you
know
get
what,
things
though?
done.
Yeah.
I think in some parts of storytelling, allowing yourself to just kind of like write whatever comes off the top of your head and forget about your outline for a minute can benefit. I think that's when you get really fun, interesting, character-driven stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it leads your story in more interesting directions if you just let your brain go without
Right.
It
the
is.
rules to it.
I would also say there is a certain amount of it that is like I don't know, like learning a martial art where it's like okay, initially you have to put a lot of effort and intentionality and conscious mentality into like what you're learning, but then as you get in the reps and as you sort of work on your quote unquote your kung fu or whatever, you get to a point where it becomes very automatic where you're like, oh, I know exactly where I want this story beat to go because it fits in with this and this and that. It's a skill that over time you become more and more robust at, but at the beginning it's, you know, the initial startup phase of it is extremely difficult and straining, and like you kind of wonder to yourself at the beginning, like, how am I going to be able to make all these things connect? And then once you have a certain amount of storytelling under your belt, like you begin to go, oh yeah, I can do this. And then becomes the next challenge of like not boring yourself, basically.
Not writing the same story beats
Yes.
in every book, every story that you write ever. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I think Blue has an interesting comment. She said, that's pretty much why my plot points are loose. They're like a guide that I want to shoot for, but I let the characters kind of go where they want to. Which is a fun way of writing. I will say this. So, have any of y'all ever been to a writing convention?
I have
I
not.
have not.
Oh,
No.
okay. Well, so I've been to a couple, and I went to one that was at Dragon Con, and I literally wanted to like walk up to the table and kick this man's chair out from under him. So there was this like person in the audience, and it was like an intro to writing sort of thing. And so they had a Q&A section, and one of the, I want to say it was a girl. In this story, they're going to be a girl. So this girl walked up there, and she was like, yes, my question is, I have a character that is a ballerina, but I don't know where she should go from here or how to tell the story or get her to the plot of the next plot point. And the guy was like, she was like, so what should I do? And so the guy was just like, write her to the next plot point. And he was like, next question. And it like infuriated me. So I was like, I was like, no follow-up question, like that, oh, I didn't understand what you're trying to say here or anything. He was literally just like, just write the character to the next plot point. Next question.
They were like, just do it. It's
Yeah,
just
pretty
fine.
much.
I don't
Like,
know how.
Right.
I was like, what a nice writing workshop. But I've been to a few. They're super fun. So if you
We're lovely.
What do you think the right answer is? Just curious.
So I think what the person was trying to say was they had a character that had a like unique personality, and she needed to do something that was outside of her personality, so they didn't know how to get like that character to the next plot point where it made logical sense. So like if the character's a ballerina and the next plot point is she killed her brother, but like all she's been shown in the book to be is like rainbows and butterflies, like where did we go wrong here? Like, how do we make her kill her brother? So I think
I would think to change the character or change the plot point, right?
Yeah, I would think that, or you could.
What the character wants.
Yeah, you could put them in a circumstance where it forced them to do it. Like, I don't know what the relation. That's why I was like, he should ask some follow up questions, like, what's going on in the scene.
We needed more information.
Right. He was just like, just do it. Make your dreams come true.
Just write it.
You just write
Next time,
the whole book.
like I'm a little bolder now, so maybe I would have stood up and been like, well, actually, what she's asking is.
Over the panel.
Yeah, I should have just walked up on stage. It was probably the worst panel I've ever been to, but I'll say that it was like a Dragon Con panel, so it could have been that. They could have been drunk out of their mind because, Dragon Con's a party convention. So who knows?
Adrian was just saying in the chat, James goes to Dragon Con, and he's the book talker that I sent you. That does the fantasy RPG.
I wonder if that was him. It would be really funny if that was them, and I don't remember.
Hilarious if that was him.
I don't remember people's faces. So, well, they were sitting down, so I wouldn't know. We'll talk about this later. We got really derailed. Sorry, I had a little bit of a tangent. So, with all of that we've discussed, Jess, how much of a story should a creator know before they're, actually releasing episodes or creating the story or moving beyond pre-production?
Personally, for a webcomic, I think that you should have as much of your story written or at a minimum outlined before you start as you can. I think you probably need to know your ending for sure, because that lets you, as you're going along, it lets you add in foreshadowing and things like that you can't do to focus your story if you don't know where it's going. Mm-hmm. And I've seen a lot of creators just quit because they don't know where their story's going as well.
Yeah,
so,
I agree 100%. If you don't have an ending, that's really gonna negatively impact your ability to push forward.
Mm-hmm. And it is creating a comic by yourself is a ton of work. So for me, it was way easier to keep going because I had my script done. I just had to draw what I had written. But that being said, my story did change a lot over the course of. You have to give your story room to change as well. So I think you should write it as much as possible. At least know your ending, have an outline, but also don't lock yourself into that if something else more interesting comes up. So, for me, as I was going, I really got to know my characters more as I was drawing it, and actually, working out the quirks and their dialogue and stuff. So it did change quite a bit. And by the time I got to the end of the story, the ending of the story was still the same, but my script that I had written was just it was out the window,
They would never say that.
The ending itself was still the same, but the lead up scenes, probably in the last half of the last season of The Witch's Stone, were written then, because it just changed so much. So I think you should write as much as you can so that you know where you're going, but you don't necessarily have to go there,
Yeah, right. And it really does depend on comfort level too, because I will say for myself personally, I usually always have the end figured out, and then my outline is usually here's how it begins, here's the ending, and then the middle is this giant black hole where I'm let's just see where it goes, right? I would not recommend it for everybody. It works for me a lot of the time, but the fun part about it is you get to appreciate and enjoy sort of the unexpected venues that you take. The negative part about that is you might find yourself in positions where you're like, have I just written myself into a corner here? Like, how am I going to get out of this? I don't know what I'm doing. Like, it depends on, like I said, it depends on comfort level. And I think, especially if you're doing it for the first time, what Jess is saying is really great advice, because you need to have some kind of, you need something to fall back on, right? In the event that, like, you find yourself either in a writer's block situation, or like, or also just like as a creative, as a part of the creative tempo, you're going to have weeks sometimes, or days, where you're just like not feeling creatively all there. And so it's good to have a script to fall back on, to go like, okay, this is what I do, and you just follow the directions, like you're, you know, like you're baking a pie or whatever.
Yeah, that definitely happens. You know, you have weeks where it's like, man,
dragging your feet through the
not
mud.
feeling this. And have a script. You just look at it and do what it says.
And do that.
Yeah.
I especially
think, like, if you know your big plot points, if nothing else, know your big plot points and know what needs to happen for each of those plot points to pay off. If you don't know anything else. Write those down and know what setup you need to have.
Yeah.
At least that much.
Yeah, the plot's really important, and I think maybe I'm saying the character interactions can, like the character stuff, some of it can come as you go.
Right, because some of it, I think, it can be instinctual when you're writing. You're just like, this is what would happen.
Well, because also a lot of times, I know what happens for me often is like, oh, I haven't had these two characters interact. I want them to interact. I need to make the situation happen where they're going to interact, so I can see what that's going to be like. And then, and I guess this says a lot about my writing process, where it's like, I have described my writing process as like gardening, where like I will set up and I'm not coming up with this, somebody else made this up, I can't remember who it was, I think it might have been George R.R. Martin or somebody like that, but you basically set up the environment, you set up sort of like what are all the main ingredients, and you let them organically grow into each other and see how all those interactions form a larger storyline. That works for me. That doesn't necessarily work for everybody. A lot of people feel more comfortable with that, like what I would call like the architecture type story writing, where you have all the blueprints set up before you go into actually making the thing, so that you can put it together in a more craft-like manner, where it's like, all right, this joint goes here, this screw goes there, you know, there's no surprises on the way. And the benefit of no surprises is you don't like end up with unexpected plot holes and stuff like that.
I will say one of the cool things regarding a webcomic with what we're talking about, you get feedback as you're going.
Yeah.
So you'll get comments. And I know I did. I got a few comments where I was like, you know, that's really an interesting thought that you've had here. I think I can work that in, you know?
You're like, and I was planning it all along.
Yeah, well, or it inspires you. I think there was a particular plot point that it, like, really focused the character for me. Like, something they said, I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. You know?
You're like, that's exactly what I was going for. You are so right. You are so smart.
So that is the cool thing about webcomics, is that you can get feedback as you're going, and it can inspire where your writing goes.
Oh yeah, I've made entire design choices based off of comments from people like who are reading, where I was like, oh, that's actually like a really good idea. And then it's wonderful. I love that.
I think that's the fun thing about doing the weekly comic, is it kind of like you can literally see the development of the story, like from art wise to all different other things that probably creators are like, my audience will never know that I incorporated this. So I was gonna ask Matt, from like a professional side where you like have to produce stories every week or you don't get paid, like And like you having that black hole sort of method, that doesn't stress you out at all? Like that would stress me out.
It didn't stress me out. I know it probably stressed the editors out. I loved it, but that probably speaks to my own mental illness more than anything. I mean, it's like, to me, I was just like, all right, I'm ready to see where this goes. And then I'm sure my editors are like, what is he doing? Like, I don't understand how this is going to connect. And but this goes back to sort of like why I enjoy watercolor, because it's the exact same way. I don't know how it's going to connect, and the fun is like making order out of all that chaos.
Oh, like when you you said black hole method earlier, my brain was just like, oh, nope, I can't. As a like person who like organizes their socks and uses coasters, I'm that life is too much for me. No, I'm sure you use coasters, Matt.
I'm kind of going back to.
I do use coasters.
Well, to the whole how experienced versus inexperienced are you? Because I think that's kind of how you know how much you need. Because me personally, I know for a fact that no matter what I'm writing, when I get to either the end of Act 2 or the beginning of Act 3, that's when I start my checklist of like, here's all of the things I need to go back and add to make this pay off. And it's just like, that's the way it is almost every single time. But if you're the kind of person that you start writing and you write beginning to end and you're like, actually, this is pretty solid. Mm-hmm. A, you're crazy. B, you probably don't need to write as much as I would need to write to get started.
Yeah, and that's why it is important to talk in regards to like experience level, because like by the time I had done like that process I just described was for Trailer Park Warlock. That wasn't my process for everything that I was doing previous to that point. Like I did write scripts for a long time, for at least 800 pages of comics. I did scripts, either scripts I was working with a friend or scripts I was working with myself, and I wrote my own scripts. With Trailer Park Warlock, I was at that point where I understood well enough what my own internal language was that I just went chapter to chapter writing scripts, and the scripts were just thumbnails, right? And then I would work from that. And I feel most comfortable personally working from a very intuitive space, where the less thought I put into the structure, the more I have more freedom to work and think about like what the gags are going to be and what the character interactions are going to look like. But like I said, that's like many years of experience went into getting to that point, and that was not something that I was doing from the very beginning at all, for sure.
Yeah. That's actually kind of a nice segue, I think, into our last question for this segment about which is more important, popular, trendy art style, or a style that reflects your personal creativity, which I think we kind of touched on, but maybe you could like just sum this up for us, Matt, your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I would say the way that I'm doing it, I'm not going with what I would think is a popular or trendy art style, because I want to express explicitly like what is unique about my artistic voice. Mm-hmm. That being said, I think it can be very useful to look at what is trendy, what is it that people really like or want to see, if you want to improve your probability of financial success, right? And that's a difficult decision to make as an artist, right? Like, I don't have a good, clean answer on that one, you know? Like, for me, I always make the decision that's kind of self-indulgent, where it's like, I'm going to do what I think I want to do, and hopefully it works out, right? But the reality is like, if you're an artist who can draw in a style that is, like, let's say that you're drawing for, like, Marvel or whatever, they want a specific kind of superhero style that is very, like, certain kind of proportions, certain kind of, like, musculature, blah, blah, blah. Like, they're not looking for
Creativity.
Like what I would call like
personal.
What's that?
Personal creativity.
Yeah, exactly. They're not looking for personal creativity necessarily. They're looking for somebody who's going to be more likely to draw in like sort of the house style, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a decision that every artist kind of has to make for themselves, and it depends on. This kind of goes back to like how you define your own sense of success, right?
Right.
It's also how do you define your own sense of like self-worth, feeling of self-value. Do you define it through money, or do you define it through like that feeling of, oh, I expressed this thing that I've been trying to express for the longest time and I couldn't find it, and then I finally found it through this comic or this animation that I did.
Yeah, that, I feel like that's a perfect way to end this segment of what story and art, because you kind of touched on the fact that, art style, it can dictate like your money, it could dictate your popularity, and that's actually our next segment. So if Taylor or Jess had a comment on that, you guys can throw in your 2 cents, obviously.
Matt did a really good job.
Yeah, I thought it summed it up pretty perfectly. So let's talk about marketing, target audience, and feedback. So let's see. I think Jess should start our discussion on our first question. What marketing strategies should creators look into as a way to increase their project success? So Jess, you finished the comic. What did you do to make it successful? What strategies?
Well, I'm about to tell you the super secret #1 tip on Webtoon, how to get attention on Webtoon.
Is it a 3-letter word?
I don't know.
She's like counting on her finger. She's like, oh God.
The super secret tip is to suck up to Webtoon Canvas. That's how you do it. So I was promoted by Webtoon, I think 5 times. Webtoon Canvas in different ways. They put me on like a reading list. They put me on the front page a couple of times. They put me on the top of Canvas a couple of times. And how I got their attention was just being nice to them on Instagram. So I participated in I think it was the first time, they noticed me. I was participating in like the festival. Is that what it's called? Like the Webtoon Canvas Festival?
Mm-hmm.
Taylor, is that what it's called? Yeah.
Why did you ask me specifically?
Well, because you were a Canvas creator, I thought you'd remember.
I was.
Yeah. So, but I did artwork for that, and then I tagged them in the artwork, tagged Webtoon Canvas. And then I think the first time they reached out to me, they asked if they could repost my festival artwork on the Canvas Instagram page, and I had to sign a little release or whatever, and then I told them thank you, right? They made a little story and said thanks Webtoon Canvas, right? And then the next time they promoted me on they promoted me on Webtoon itself, and I made a little story and tagged them and said thank you Webtoon Canvas. Just being polite to them did wonders for getting noticed. So that was really helpful. That was the most helpful marketing thing that I've ever done, because posting on social media is really shooting into the void.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there are definite strategies, and there are some people who are really good at it. I'm not really good at it. I did shift my content towards the end of The Witch's Stone to making things that were more reader focused versus artist focused, if that makes any sense. So instead of speed paints, I would make edits of my comic, the edits to music or funny sounds, like Instagram sounds or TikTok sounds. That those ones really blow up really good if you can find a good funny sound that fits your characters. But yeah, those are my practical tips. Be nice to Webtoon Canvas and tag them in your posts whenever they are related to them. I would say don't tag them in like every post, but like
Right.
that'll probably get annoying. But like if you're doing like the Canvas Festival or stuff like that, tag them because they need to know that you're there. Like there are hundreds of thousands of comics on Webtoon Canvas, and if they don't know that you're there, then they can't promote you. So
I'm taking notes right now for sure.
Yeah, no.
This is not something that even crossed my mind, because even though I was a Webtoon original, like they cast me back down to Canvas, right? Like I'm starting back from the beginning, so like this is really great information to know about.
Yeah, just be polite to them and tag them in your posts so that they know that you exist. Otherwise, they're not know that you exist.
No, the exact same thing just happened with the Beast of Amity Bluff, where it was like every time I got promoted and like got that huge follower boost, it was because I was active like with Webtoon Canvas on other social media platforms. I also, you said something really specific about like gearing your content to readers versus other creators. And I think there is like something to be said about that and the balance between the two, because I have like my TikTok is super reader based. Like almost everybody who follows me on TikTok is like people who consume content more so than they create content, which is great because those are the kind of people that are like buying books and reading comics and like doing that kind of stuff, because people who are making the comics and making the books don't have time to read all of the ones that they want to read. But having spaces like my Instagram, which is much smaller, that is a lot more creator based, gives you the opportunity then to like you promote other creators and show them off to your audience, and they promote you, and now you have this other subset of people who already trust another creator who are seeing your work from them.
Yeah, I think that is a really good strategy. Any company you're like interacting with, whether it's in an official sense or in a like yoo-hoo, I'm over here sense, I think it's good to just have a decent relationship, because every once in a while they'll throw you a bone. I will say, as far as like marketing strategies, I do think that it is a different mindset when you're trying to attract readers. And sometimes I think that is like a big pitfall that a lot of people fall into. But I think it's also kind of hard to like market your comic sometimes on social platforms. So you have to get like real creative about like what you're doing. Like I think, what is his name? Adam Tots. He's like he does like 4-panel comics or whatever. Like people read his
David guy.
Yeah. People read his comics because like they're funny or whatever. But like that's how he's kind of like built his platform. But he has a bunch of other interests. But I think he does a good job of like targeting the people that want to read like funny little stories. So I don't know. I feel like there's still some growth and strategies for marketing, but I mean, I'm not a marketing expert, so maybe Matt, do you have any strategies?
I was gonna say I'm entirely a student in this topic, because I mean, coming into Webtoon, I was completely like relying on Webtoon to do the promotion for Trailer Park Warlock, and so now that I'm doing a title where I'm responsible for the promotion, I'm back at beginner level, and for me it is extremely challenging because I don't fully understand how to connect with like new audiences, right? Like I know decently well how to connect with the people who have already come into my work and know what it's about, like, and I love connecting to them. It's awesome. It's how do I connect this weird title that is very like odd and goofy and like very specific to my kind of humor to people who don't even know that it's something that they would like, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you, it's not even about persuading or convincing, it's just like, how do you just introduce a thing to somebody, right? How do you go like, oh, I've been diligently working away on a comic book for years and I would love it if you like spent some time reading it. And they're like, wait, what's a webtoon? And then you have to kind of start from there and build up and be like, okay, it's basically a comic. I swear this isn't like a scam or something. Can you just read it, please? Like, go ahead.
Sorry, you can finish.
No.
You. I'm so
Go ahead.
sorry.
I don't even remember what I was gonna say.
Okay. Well, I was gonna say I think what you're looking for are comp titles to be able to say like, if you like this, and this, you'll really like my story because it encompasses the things that already exist that people really like about those fandoms or those titles or whatever.
That's a good point. Yeah, for sure.
I still think Webtoons is in like a growing stage because like I think about like for novelists and whatnot, there's a lot of marketing strategies that are employed. Like you have like radio talk shows or you have like podcasts that are really like centered around it, and like these podcasts have grown to the point where like readers and not just other creators are listening to them. And so like if you get on one of these shows, like it can really boost you, or like if another creator shouts you out, it can really boost you. So I think some of it is still like growing pains, and some of it's also like you have to put yourself in situations that might make you uncomfortable. Like I couldn't imagine doing like a radio talk show. Like 1037 was like, hey, come be on our writer segment for the month, please. Like that would like freak me out or whatever. But I feel like in order to grow the brand that you're trying to produce, those are things that more creators are gonna have to like dip their toes into.
Which I actually wouldn't mind for myself being able. I have actually done a paranormal radio talk show once because it was somebody who had read Trailer Park Warlock, and they were like, "Oh, we would love to have you on our like paranormal radio show." I was like, "Okay." It turned out like being like a really like the phone connection was really terrible, so I couldn't understand anything that they were saying. So I just had to like improv my way through the interview, just assuming I understood what they were saying, and 75% of the time I figured it out. But like I'm saying, if there are any paranormal radio shows out there, look,
you're their guy.
I'd love to come on. I'm happy to talk about
this. This is the marketing.
Yeah, this is the marketing.
I'm happy to talk about UFOs.
So
take notes, people.
I did want to highlight a comment from Laundromat and Lawnmower. I can't talk tonight. Like, I'm struggling, y'all. They said, my strategy with social media is posting as much as you can because something will stick eventually. And let me just say this.
It's true.
As someone who's worked adjacent to 2 marketing companies, I swear that's all they do. Like, they spend like thousands of dollars and just like throw stuff out there. They're like, are we selling doctor health insurance? Let's do an ad on a gingerbread cookie box. Okay.
Yeah, Laundromat and Lawnmower know how to promote, so whatever they say, do that. Don't do... Yeah. Because their TikTok is a biggin.
I was gonna say, just think about like how many things come through your feed versus like how many people are posting all day, every day. No one's gonna see your one post every other day on Instagram. Like, you have to be consistent for it to actually hit everybody's main page often enough for them to think about you when they actually leave the app and go look at what you do.
Oh, I was going to say, so when we first started this discussion, the 3-letter word, like Jess, I thought you were going to do like a gag, like you were going to do like a haha. And so the word I was thinking of was abs.
And if you're posting on Webtoon to make your characters kiss, I mean, you just got to make them kiss.
And then they kiss. and that's
Yeah.
how you get popular.
Oh.
And abs don't hurt.
And they kissed. Now pay me my money.
Right.
Oh.
And then he took his shirt off. Oh no, where did it go?
It just dissolved. Oh man. Okay, so getting back on track. Taylor, thinking about beta readers, do you think that creators should do this before they launch their comic? And like, I wanted to know from your perspective, since you've done a comic and you've done a novel now, like, do you think the beta reader process could even work for a comic that's ongoing?
Okay.
Like, it's a
So,
lot.
To
Like,
start off, if you're it's a multi-part question. I'm going to answer it in kind of multiple segments. As far as getting beta readers just for your writing, I think that they're very beneficial if you are getting them for the right reasons. They're not editors. You're not sending them your stuff for them to look at your grammar or your story structure or whatever. You're really sending it out to get perspective on what you've written, right? You want them to send their opinions back so you can look at their opinions and be like, okay, what do I want to take away from this, and what do I want to change based on this feedback? More so than like taking what they're saying for gospel, right? Because they may be like, oh, I hate that you killed off that character, and you're like, yeah, you're supposed to. That's great that you hate that.
Yeah.
And for a comic, it would be an interesting process to try and do that. I think you would be better off maybe having beta readers who are also comic creators, not necessarily to look at your finished product, but maybe to send scripts over and just say, will you look at this script and tell me if you think that like everything is flowing well and that everything is coming across okay? Just because once you've drawn the whole episode, you would be hard pressed to go in and change a major plot point in an episode that you've already finished for that week.
Yeah, it's a lot easier. It's more difficult to change for sure after you've already drawn everything.
Right. Like some of my edits in my book were a matter of like going in and like adding a sentence somewhere. That's not the same as like, this panel I think should be drawn from a different angle. Well, that's not great that you think that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I have gone in. I mean, I'll say for Trailer Park Warlock, there have been a couple of times where I've gone in and adjusted panels, either because the reading experience there was something that was missing that needed to be added, or like something needed to be altered for ease of readability, basically. But that happened only a couple of times, right? And I will say, that is something that's really nice about, particularly like with the way the Webtoon and the Webtoon Canvas platforms are set up, is that you can go in and edit stuff pretty easily if you need to. And I would say don't be afraid of that, but also don't get so intense about it that you end up like George Lucasing your story, right? Where you're just adding in, more fairies, more aliens, more like special
People
effects.
who are going back and rereading are missing entire chunks of context.
Yeah. Oh, there's a musical number added. When did that happen?
There's a musical?
When did this get here?
Oh man, yeah, Taylor, I like that perspective, because when I was thinking about it, I was like, I don't even know how a beta reader would work for this, but I think that sounds, in theory, since it's like not tested, or at least that's what I took away from that, was that giving them the script and letting another webcomic creator kind of like just read it over to kind of maybe make suggestions, maybe be like, yeah, this looks good. I think that sounds like a good idea. It's almost like a I don't even know what to call it exactly. So, I don't know. Like a beta edit, maybe, more so?
Yeah, the whole point of the beta reader is just to get somebody else's perspective on what you
Yeah,
have done.
yeah.
So that way they can be, I don't understand why this character did this. And in your head, you're like, well, it's obvious because X, Y, or Z. But now you know I didn't ever say that. I never said that that was true.
Right,
And
exactly.
then go back and figure out where to add it.
And sometimes people will read into stuff where it doesn't even make sense how they read into it, but it's just like the way the human mind works. It'll, different people create different patterns out of like what's presented to them, and it takes a lot of experience getting to that point where you can have an idea of like, oh, what I write I'll be able to communicate exactly, what I'm thinking onto the paper. It takes years to get to that too. Or it took me years anyway, I should say. I know that there were several stories where like I wasn't sure if I actually knew how to properly communicate, because I would have friends read it and they would get something completely different out of like what I was trying to put forward, and that was initially really discouraging, right? But it is very helpful at the same time because it will allow you to have that process of like basically refining your skills to be at a point where you have full confidence about what you're doing.
Yeah, I completely.
Not only is it,
when that happens, it's important to ask the person, like, if it's someone you can ask why they think that, like, why did you get that impression?
Yeah.
And that can help you
and don't argue
your writing better.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't argue with your beta readers. Don't start a fight. Listen to them.
Listen, I am a completely deranged beta reader because I love to theory craft. So like if anyone asks me,
so great.
Yeah, if anyone asks me to be like, oh, will you beta read this? Like, I'm like in the weeds. Like y'all, like there's a trail over here that all the other beta readers are on. Like I've like created a pond and like a dam, and I'm like over here in left field. Like beta reader Apollo is like
on the side of the road.
Yeah. Beta reader Apollo is so different from editor Apollo because like my reading brain is like there for a good time. And so I'm just like, oh, well, making this be the love triangle is much more interesting. Oh, is she in love with the door? Like
there were some comments that you made when you were beta reading for me. Some of them were unhinged and so out of left field. Some of them, I was like, you know what? I didn't mean that, but I think I should lean into it.
Because that's what makes the story fun for me. And I feel like beta readers, that like if I'm reading the story and if I'm able to theory craft and have like a good time, I feel like you're doing a good job. Mm-hmm. Like if I'm there struggling through the story to be like if I'm reading and I start editing, that means like something's not right here. So
yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I was telling Adrian when I arc read for Adrian on her book. And I didn't know what an arc reader was, to be honest, when she gave it to me. So at first I was like, am I supposed to be like reading this for errors or not? I wasn't sure. And so I started reading it kind of trying to have editor brain on. And I got like a page and a half in and I couldn't edit because I was just so stuck into the story immediately. So yeah, I agree with you, Apollo.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to sidetrack us too much. I'm clearly the problem during this discussion. So, Matt, what are your thoughts on target audiences? Do they make a difference? Like, should people like have a broad audience, a little audience? Like, what should they be doing?
I mean, if you know what your target audience is, you're like one step ahead of everybody. I feel like I had no idea who my target audience was when I was starting like with Webtoon. Like I was just like, we'll see. And
oh my good grief! I feel like when I read your story. That? No, I was gonna say I feel like immediately when I read your story, I knew who your target audience was. Like from the first like few panels.
Where are they?
Yeah, now I know better who they are, but I'm still, I think for me, I think it's just my brain doesn't conceive of these things. It's just like, I'm going to make a thing and find out who likes it, right? I don't know who those people are going to be. And then like over time, I've noticed a pattern where it's like, okay, a lot of people who are into D&D really like this. And so that has given me a sort of idea of like, this is what my target audience is. But like, what I'm saying here is I'm really bad at understanding like marketing demographics, right? Like I'm really bad at marketing. Like that's the TLDR on this topic. But like I was saying, if you know who your target audience is, that's an amazing place to be in, I feel like, because that can be, in terms of promoting your story or whatever it is that you're making or doing, that can be an incredible asset at your disposal, for sure.
Yeah, I
Jess,
think.
do you have anything to add?
Yeah, Jess, what do you have to say?
I don't. For me, my target audience was always pretty easy because there's like statistics about who reads romance stories. So,
The ladies.
use female, and then it's on a webtoon. So we're talking what, like 14 to 30 probably age group. So I never really had to put that much thought into it. And then I'm also in that demographic. So, I post on Instagram and TikTok. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
didn't have to think about it that much because I'm in that demographic and I kind of know what those people are doing. You know what I'm saying?
No, I'm with Jess. My target audience is consistently me. I am the target audience.
So Taylor Swift fans.
Same.
Yeah, well, people who like Taylor Swift, Marvel, Grey's Anatomy, like if you like those things, you'll probably like what I do. It's kind of where we stand.
You know, I actually like that point that you brought up, like some other like popular series. I feel like more creators, if they would just like copy, if they could, like if they find out that their target audience is similar to another popular series, like there it is, follow their marketing strategy and just go from there.
Listen, you know how I was talking about shifting my marketing strategy from artists to readers?
Mm-hmm.
I got that. I got that idea from laundromat and lawnmower. That's why I said they know more than I do, because I copied them. I was
Right.
like,
Shout out to Jess's personal friend Taylor Swift.
If you guys don't know,
yeah,
I was gonna say, if you guys don't know, Jess has lived a very adjacent life to Taylor Swift. Like, she really is the great Jess. Like, there's no denying it at this point. Also, Jess
is constantly one human away from Taylor Swift.
Also, I feel like I'm being like, it would be an injustice for me not to shout out Amanda Arts. Like, she has like been shouting all your praises throughout the stream, Jess. So I just wanted to call attention to that.
She's a plant. I paid her.
Good strategy.
That makes sense.
You guys didn't pay. You guys pay fans to show up.
No, I can't pay people to come to my own channel.
I only paid them in baked goods, so.
Matt, that's what we need to do. Instead of y'all coming to my place, we need to go to Matt's because he cooks. Like, don't you take cooking classes?
I do. I am a pretty good cook, actually. Yeah.
All right, I know where I'm going this summer.
Not gonna brag.
So in terms of money and popularity, I feel like that kind of goes hand in hand with like marketing and also people's mindset on being like successful and being like moving towards the place that they want to be. So when we're thinking about this concept, is success determined by financial gain or a large following? What do you think, Jess? Because I feel like a lot of people base their success off of this.
I think it's actually really important not to base your success off of that. Because Taylor touched on it earlier. It's a lot of it that is out of your control, you know. So I think it's healthier to base your success on goals that, like, attainable goals that you have control over. Like, for example, I'm going to make 2 comic episodes this month, and I'm going to finish them and have them posted before the end of the month. That's a goal that you have direct control over. As far as, I mean, like, obviously, if you're trying to you know, live off of the money that you're making from your art or your creative endeavor, you know, you might not be able to have that luxury. But I do think it's you'll be happier if you can base your success on things that you actually have control over.
For sure. Personal goals is a big deal.
Yeah. Did you have more that you wanted to say, Taylor?
Well, I pretty much, what Jess said is pretty much what I would also say. To base your success off of something that you have no control over, you're never going to be happy, right? Yeah. Like, you'll hit the 50K followers or whatever, and you'll be like, but this other creator has 100K. I'm not as successful as they are, so now I need 100K. Whereas if you're basing your success off of, I'm gonna finish writing what I'm working on by June, right?
Yeah.
When June comes, you either finish it or you don't. And when you do finish it, you get to be like, that's great that I did that. That's a success for me. And to take that win and to celebrate that for yourself.
Yeah, and this goes back to the idea of, like, the things that you create are going to have a life of their own outside of your control, and, like, just be willing to accept that, because there is sort of a, you know, you make something and you let it kind of go, like your little baby bird or whatever, that you don't know if it's going to make it, right? Like, you've laid all these sea turtles, you don't know if they're going to make it back to the ocean. You're going to have to kind of accept.
That's so sad.
Most of the sea turtles don't make it, though.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, no. The albatrosses get them, the seagulls get them.
Oh,
like,
man.
That's so sad.
There are harsh realities to being an artist, right? But if you can accept that, you can at least say, well, at least I laid like 200 eggs, so some of them ought to make it. You know,
except the fact that you creating it is a success in of itself.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
I want to write that. I want to hang that on my wall. I laid 200 eggs.
You don't have to lay eggs to be successful here.
Obviously, Matt, you should create, this would be a perfect marketing strategy for you. You should just create t-shirts of things that you say and then just have them, like, Trailer Park Warlock adjacent. Like, just start your own.
Yeah, I mean, at least I laid 200 eggs is a pretty good t-shirt idea.
I would wear it.
I would wear it, yeah.
I'll buy it. Me and Taylor will buy it.
Yes.
I don't know if anybody else will, but me and Taylor are in.
That'll be your marketing. Jess and I will wear it, and that's your marketing.
Nice. I appreciate that.
What I think is interesting about this is I think a lot of people jump the gun and they're worried about, like, financial gain and popularity. And I'm like, your story hasn't even proven itself in, like, the market yet. Like, I would focus more so on what you guys were saying is, like, just telling a good story. Like, especially if it's your first story. That's so much pressure to put on yourself for your first story. Is it going to make me money? I'm like, can you finish the story first and then decide?
Yeah.
So
that's why I want to reiterate, like, make sure that it is on the shorter side as a story, so that you can at least check that off and go, okay, I've done that. Let's build the next brick in our castle, basically.
Right. And I don't know if this is so much a thing in the comic world as much as it is in the self-publishing world. But if you are worried about things like money and followers or whatever, for some perspective, most people don't start making money until they have a backlog of work. So when people pick up that one thing that they really like that you do, and they read it all and are done with it, they can go back to the other things that you've already done, right? You're not just making money off of the one thing.
Right. Yeah, some long term or longevity in your sort of like
Right.
career. Like there will be like I think even for like popular writers, like sometimes they'll release a book and it's not as successful as like their previous books. But,
Right.
it's still kind of just the whole process of being an artistic creator. So I
I
guess
mean,
that
if you listen,
oh, uh-huh.
I'm sorry.
No, no, no. Go
I
ahead.
just wanted to add one thing. If you listen to like interviews with a lot of film directors,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of them they had multiple movies, right? And each movie was probably, a good like a million, couple $100,000 each. Multiple movies where they were not commercial successes, but because they
Mm.
were able to get back in and continue making movies, something happened along the way at some point where people started to accept them as being like directors. And you can apply this to writers or whatever. Because they were persistent, there was a point when people were like, "Oh, like I know about this person. I've seen them somewhere. I don't know who they are." Like this isn't a guaranteed route to success, but it heightens your probability of success in that regard. Like if we want to talk about quote unquote financial success or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
if you're persistent, that is going to help you out. That's all I wanted to add, Paul. I'm sorry.
No,
sure.
no, that was actually perfect because I was going to ask you why you think money is such a big issue for creators, Matt. So that kind of ties into that.
Well, it's largely, I mean, I wouldn't care about money except that I needed to pay rent and like eat food and do other things. I would just as well live in a cave, but I can't find electricity in a cave. And
You
so
need
that's
Wi-Fi.
a challenge. Yeah, I need Wi-Fi. I can't get it from like, the birds that come about in the cave. I have
I'm
to
going to live in Apollo's bunker.
Taylor.
I could live in Apollo's basement, and then
Please don't divulge these
future
secrets.
Wi-Fi
People don't
and
need to know that.
But yeah, I mean, money can be a really effective resource for doing things like, I don't know, being able to hire assistants so that you can increase your productivity on on a project, or it can allow you to get access to other tools that might allow you to expand your range of possibilities and how you want to express yourself. That being said, like, you know, realities being what they are, it is harder to have a lot of money if you're only going to just be, making art all the time. Or at least the probability is it makes it harder, it would seem, as opposed to having a day job and then doing the art stuff as your hobby or as your side hustle or whatever you want to call it. I think for myself, I've largely been pretty much fully employed in art for the last 5, 6. Oh no, I would say like a decade. But it's feast or famine. So you have periods where like the wind goes out of your cells, and you're like, okay, I hope this works out. Like right now, I'm a little bit in that period, not horribly, but like a little bit, where it's like, oh, it's a little quieter than it was when I was working on Trailer Park Warlock.
Mm-hmm.
And so you either have to get used to those cycles as a person, which is extremely difficult and requires a certain kind of mindset that I don't think I would want to ask anybody to have. But that's why I'm trying to remember the original context of your question. But like, basically, I think part of the reason why money is such a big issue is like, ideally, right, we want to be in a situation where there isn't a disconnect between our creative life and the rest of the life that we're living, right? Like, it would be ideal to have exactly what I'm creating lead to paying my rent, my Wi-Fi, my food, all that stuff, so that I can spend 100% of my time like creating, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that kind of goes back to when you want to live a creative life and be a creative person, set for yourself goals that actually align with your resources that you have available. And what those resources aren't just money, it's your time, it's your energy, it's your emotional wherewithal. And sometimes it takes a certain amount of experience to figure out what all those different things are. But if you can find those things, and if you understand, intuitively for yourself what it is that you're capable of, given the time that you have, given the job that you have, given, all those particular factors, you can make the most of your situation. And, maybe that means some evenings you stay up a little later so that you can get a couple extra panels done, or, get that chapter finished. But so long as you do it in a way that you're not burning yourself out and you're not negatively impacting your overall health, because ultimately your most important resource in all of that is your physical health and your mental health, right? Because if you don't have either of those, you're not going to be creating for very long at all. So I guess that's my very long-winded response to that question.
What about you guys?
That's great. I'm going to disagree just a little bit with Matt. Not a lot, just a little bit.
Oh, 1 second, Taylor.
That I don't.
I just want to tell Matt, you have created chaos in the chat with this bird Wi-Fi thing, and I just must bring attention to it. It's like getting a little deranged.
The plan is working.
Starting an uprising against the birds.
Okay, I'm sorry, Taylor. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. That was way more important than what I was going to say. I think there's something really enticing for people who are creative in making whatever you enjoy doing your career and making money off of it, with the thought process being, I want to be writing and drawing all the time while I'm doing all of these other things. And if it's my career, I get to do it all the time. But what people, I don't think, consider before it actually happens to them, and you touched on this a little bit towards the end, is that goes from being your hobby to being your job. You gotta find new hobbies now, because you can't do your job 24 hours a day. Like you can't. No matter how much you love it, you'll kill yourself.
I 100% agree with what you're saying right there, but I'm sorry, go ahead, Taylor.
Yeah. But there is something, I mean, I have a very supportive, I have a full-time job and I have a boss who's very supportive of me, like, having a life outside of work, which is great. And she asked me one time, she was like, so if you ever got really successful, would you quit? And I was like, probably not, because I got really successful with a full-time job. Why would I then quit the job and cut off a whole source of income to continue doing the thing that I was already doing? I think that there is balance to be had there in, do you really want to do this full time, or is this something that is a really fun hobby that it's great if you make money off of it, and if you don't, that's okay too?
Yeah, it does put more pressure on it if you are relying on your art or your life, for funding your life.
Well, and I think what this speaks to too is something that I think a slow realization that I'm having over time, which is that for myself, I've been in that mindset of like full-time artist, and then now that I have had that experience, I'm beginning to slowly go like, okay, but also what about the rest of my life, right? Mm-hmm. Like I've had that experience, and now it's not that it isn't fulfilling. It is very fulfilling, but also there is like literally a whole other world outside of just art that also can feed back into your art too, right?
Right.
And that you do need on some level, just not only for personal growth, not only for artistic growth, but just like to have a fully lived life.
Yeah.
I think.
And I just want to circle back to the original question just a little bit. I'm wondering what you guys think about this. I kind of feel like there's a general idea, like in the creative community, that, you know, if for some people think, well, if you're not making money off of what you're doing, is it worth doing? And I know that
The
kind of
grind mindset.
yeah,
Mhm.
that kind of held me back for a while, like when I was younger. And then you know, it just clicked, like, yeah, it's worth doing because I want to do it. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's like, I mean, I think for all of us, right? We all started from a place of where we were creating because that was what we wanted to do with our time that wasn't like school time or work time,
Right.
And the idea that should then consume every aspect of your life, it is alluring for a while. And I guess that I'm speaking like the mad prophet out of the desert, where it's like, I have experienced it. You don't want to just do that. Like, you don't want to just be sucked into that all the time, because you'll then you could potentially come to a point where you actually hate art. And I've actually had that kind of moment happen for me, where like I went for a year where I hadn't read any comics, and people were asking me like, "Oh, what webtoons do you read?" And I'm like, I haven't really read any webtoons because my entire life is like making a webtoon, and the last thing I want to think about is like another webtoon, and that sucks to think, right? Like that's kind of a crappy like mindset to be in, because it actually in some way disengages me from the original thing that brought me into this in the first place, which was the enjoyment in the sharing of like an experience with other people. Like, oh, I create something and I share it with people, and then you create something and you share it with me, and like we get to go back and forth. Yeah. And so anyway, I guess that's my word of caution, I suppose, to people who want to get into the full-time artist realm, is that there are pitfalls to it. And I would say for myself, like, I'm coming out the other end of that. But it's a very slow and long process.
I think, you know, what's interesting about this is this question did not go in the direction I thought it was going to go at all. Like, because for me, I think a lot of what's the issue with money comes from like companies not being transparent and the way they kind of market things.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about like not just webtoons, but like you know, publishing houses all over the place. Like everything is very cloak and dagger. Yeah. But they're really keen to promote like their success stories, and they're like, oh, look at X. They're like a millionaire now from releasing their debut novel, and they have like a movie deal and a book deal. And so it just makes that sort of lifestyle sound really alluring to people. And so I feel like when people see that, it makes them feel like, oh, well, there's so much money out there, like I should be pursuing this because like I don't want to say get rich quick scheme, but sometimes I feel like that's the way it's presented. It's like
it gives that impression because you don't see all the people they've run over who are now roadkill on the side of the road. Yeah.
No, right, that are burnt out and exhausted and hurt and poor.
There was a creator I was watching not too long ago, and I can't remember what video or who it was specifically, but he was saying like from what he's seen, a webtoon episode can go from like $800 to $7,000. That was like the highest he got offered for one episode, and I was like, what a discrepancy. Like that's not,
I mean, my experience in comics in general, that's nothing particularly new, because it's that way in print comics as well. And and even in worse ways where it was like, so like I worked as a colorist for the Plants vs Zombies graphic novels for a little bit, and I didn't get cover credit for any of those books. And like I asked the editor that I was working with at the time, is like, is it possible for me to get cover credit, because I see this other colorist get cover credit on the title I was comparing to was Hellboy, because this was that was also the same company. And their response was basically like, well, Hellboy is more of a prestige title, so he can do that. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, it was such a like, why did you even bother asking that question kind of a question or answer? And I was just, that is such a typical mindset for so much of the publishing world. And honestly, it's really crappy, because it actually ends up backfiring in a lot of ways. Like, they end up, because they do that, they end up destroying their talent pools over time.
Yeah.
But they're not thinking that forward. And publishing houses rarely do, because speaking about Webtoon, they're clearly drinking from the fire hose of like trying to edit and make sure like all of this content that they're putting out is like age acceptable, or like meets these requirements that they have set up in their corporate hierarchy. And like they've set up their own difficulties in that way. And it never ceases to amaze me, I guess. I'll just leave it at that.
Oh, don't get in trouble, Matt.
Yeah.
So I definitely, it's just, that's an interesting, that there was a lot of unique perspectives on that, more so than I thought there would be. I didn't even think about what you said, Jess, at all, about like people not supporting you. And I guess that comes from, I've always been in a family that's very supportive of artistic endeavors. But I think that's because like nobody in my family does art. Like none of my cousins, none of my uncles or aunts. So it's like such a big deal, I guess, that I like art. So I don't know. I feel like everybody's situation is a little different. But long story short.
Yeah, I will say, to clarify, I got that idea, that what I said about is this worth doing if I'm not getting paid for it. I didn't get that from my family. That was me.
Like, to be fair, those are my intrusive thoughts.
No one ever said that.
Actually, nobody told Jess that. I'll just move on to our last question for the segment. Taylor, can creators create a successful comic without following popular trends?
So I think you can look at this question from a couple of different angles. The one we've talked about the most is this idea of, well, it depends on how you define success. If your definition of success is it exists and I posted it somewhere, yes, absolutely, no questions. If you want to look at a piece of art or media as a long-term living thing, even if you posted something today, it's still going to be on the internet, 5-10 years from now. Maybe it's going to hit a trend in 5 or 10 years. Who knows? Or the stars align and you're the person who has picked out just the right trend at the right time, or I guess non-trend at the right time, to be one of the first to get in on something before it becomes a trend.
You start the trend. Yeah.
Right. You're a part of that group. You're a part of the group of romance authors who are like, I should write about hockey players, like a year ago. And you just happen to get in on it early enough that it's not a trend yet.
Yeah.
But in terms of marketing, if you're wanting to create something and you want it to be really successful right this second, I think you're going to go in and be relatively disappointed, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that you can't really have a whole lot of control as to whether or not what you're going to make is going to align at all. Yeah, there's no, not to mention, like, things change over time in regards to just how, like, the way the internet works today is so different from how it worked like a decade or more ago. Because, like, in the long ago, it used to just be like cat videos, right? Like, if you told somebody, hey, did you see that cat video? They knew exactly what you were saying. But nowadays, if you say, hey, did you see that cat video? There's like 500,000 cat videos you could be talking about. And so everything's so like subcultured and like subdivided into its own little unique genre and community and whatever, it's impossible to know like what target you're hitting. So on some level, you just have to have the audacity to just make something, broadcast it out there, and then hope that it finds that little, ragtag team of weirdos and miscreants who want to like come along with you on your ride. And like that in itself is a really wonderful experience because you don't feel like you're a crazy person, and at least in the same sense anyway. You're a crazy person in a different sense perhaps, but like in another way, it's like I don't know. It's just like really nice to have a community and have a community built out from your work. And getting to that point is like it's a long ride, but it is very for me. I would say that's been like an indicator of success for me is like having people that I know who like know me through my work, and like I can build out relationships with them and like talk with them about stuff and like have inside jokes and things like that. Like that's a very meaningful thing to me because it's a very real world manifestation of my effort, if that makes sense. Because like we're now going to start talking about manifesting, so I hope y'all are ready.
Oh no.
I'm gonna pull up the tarot card.
Yeah, we're manifesting some Wi-Fi signals from those birds.
I manifest eggs.
No.
Okay.
Oh man, I think trends work for creators only if you're like interested in the trend. Because if the trend passes before you release what you wanted to put out, it's like I missed my window. So I'm kind of like I feel like it's a double-edged sword sort of situation where it's like, well, if I like this, great, I'm going to release it. But if I don't like this and I work on this and now everybody, like you were talking about, Taylor, people a year ago might have been into hockey players. Well, now they're into inanimate objects. And it's like the girl and the... Yes. No, that's like actually a series. There's this series about this girl that's like falling in love with her door, but like it's wild. I'll have to send it to y'all. I'll have to send it to y'all. It's pretty crazy. Like reading a scene of really two characters, like one being a door and another being an actual person, it's kind of crazy.
A sentient door, mind you.
Yeah, a sentient door.
The door can give consent.
Okay, well, I mean, all right.
So that's what I'm saying. Like,
straight on.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, trends can be crazy. I don't think I could ever find myself writing about like.
They move so fast.
Yeah, writing about something crazy like that. So, well.
Also, like.
Oh, you had a comment?
It was really like a really quick one. Trends move fast, but if you can pinpoint trends that seem to have longevity, I don't think there's any issue in pandering to that. Like things like enemies to lovers. That's not a trend that is like a short-lived thing. Like that's just something that people tend to like across the board long term. And like being able to differentiate, I think, is important.
Yeah. So I was going to say, I just appreciate you guys being on here for the first roundtable discussion. I thought it was pretty successful. I think we agreed and disagreed on some stuff, but I thought it developed the conversation pretty well. So we're entering into our Q. That was great. Okay, well, if nobody has anything else to comment on, then I guess we'll wrap it up. So I just want to say...
Amazing.
thank you to you guys for showing up. I really appreciate it. It was a lot
Yeah, it
of
was-
fun.
Thank you for inviting us.
I hope I can
Yeah,
have
it
you
was really
guys
fun.
back on and we can chat some more about, the creative process.
for sure.
Yes.
So I will just go into my outro mode. Thank you all for showing up tonight in the chat. I really appreciate you guys. And if we didn't get a chance to say hello to you, a big hello and also a good night. Our question
Yeah, good
to
night,
the
y'all, and thanks for hanging out.
Good night.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Our question to the community, which you can comment after the video ends. How do you realistically define success? So this is a personal opinion. There are no right or wrong answers, but I would love to know what you think in the comments below. So if you enjoyed the video, you know how to do all the things. Subscribe, like, comment. Thank you to our patrons. Be sure to follow us on social media, and we will catch you in the next video.